Hello everyone, I am Ava, and today I will bringing you a story about a mountaineering team lost in the snow-covered mountains called the mountain that doesn't exist. Let's start. The 7 of us went mountain climbing, and after a fierce snowstorm, the climbers started dying one by one under mysterious circumstances. Strange footprints in the snow, mysterious firelight streaking through the night, and eerie shadows flickering by. In the end, we realised we had climbed a mountain that didn't even exist. The tent was dimly lit. I sat on the ground, hugging my knees, completely stunned. Suddenly, my phone screen received a signal out of nowhere. I saw a news alert being pushed out. 7 university students missing on their 5th day of mountain climbing. Rescue teams have found no clues. Photos of the missing 7 are now being circulated. If you have any information, please contact local authorities immediately. The face in the 3rd photo looked all too familiar. Every day when I looked in the mirror, I saw that face. It was my own. It was the 5th day I was missing. My phone occasionally received messages when there was a signal, but I couldn't send any messages or make calls. We were trapped by this snow mountain because we had climbed a mountain that didn't exist at all. 2 weeks ago, during our graduation trip, Olivia from my dorm suggested we go hiking. Since we had already signed a contract and were busy with graduation, we moved the trip to the last winter break before graduation. Imagine having our names engraved at the mountain peak. Isn't that the best graduation trip ever? When she said that, I got a bit excited. Usually we'd go to amusement parks, beaches, or ancient cities. After a while, that gets pretty boring. Climbing a snow mountain? That was a first. But none of us had any experience. Climbing a snow mountain isn't a joke. One wrong move and we could end up making headlines. None of us have ever done this before. Is it a bit dangerous? Sophia from the next dorm hesitated a bit. No worries. Olivia's tone had a hint of pride. My boyfriend is from the mountaineering club. He's climbed Everest and all that. We're planning to go to Helakla Peak. It's just over 1,000 metres. For him, it's a piece of cake. He can easily handle the 4 of us. Olivia definitely had reasons to be proud. She was like a small-town beauty, not only pretty but also from a standard middle-class family. Her boyfriend, Caleb, was a rich second generation, over 6 feet tall with good looks. Their match was like the dream combo of a beautiful girl and a handsome guy. Sophia and I were somewhat persuaded, especially after seeing the snow mountain photos Olivia showed us. The massive white peaks were set against a sky painted with golden hues at sunset, looking like a masterpiece. It was truly beautiful. Only Nova didn't say anything. We all knew Nova didn't have the means. She usually wouldn't join such activities. Sophia glanced down, and the 2 of us exchanged a look, instinctively keeping silent. Since others couldn't go, there was no need to discuss sabotaging her in front of her. But to our surprise, Nova broke her usual silence and said, "Let me come too. I want to go." We were all a bit shocked, but no one asked her where the money was coming from. It's better if the whole dorm goes. Maybe she saved up from part-time jobs. After all, although Nova's family wasn't well off, she was pretty and had a killer figure. She often worked part-time as a model, making a few $1,000s each time. If it weren't for her little brother constantly asking for money, she could have lived quite comfortably. Nova smiled. "Olivia, if your boyfriend can handle the 4 of us, can he?" Olivia paused. "And his 2 friends, they're all from the club too. That makes 7 of us." Nova nodded, saying nothing more. The preparation went smoothly, and a week later, we followed Olivia's boyfriend Caleb to the foot of the snow mountain. Facing the mountain head-on, the impact was nothing like the photos. The snowy peaks stretched to the horizon, bathed in golden sunset light. They were incredibly majestic. Legend has it that after the creator god died, his limbs and body turned into mountain ranges. The hollow mountains were so grand they really looked like the buried remains of a giant. We gazed at them for a while before finally snapping out of it, deciding to stay at the base for the night and start climbing in the morning. The hollow mountains lie on the China-Russia border, with half in Russia and half in China. The Helakla Peak we were aiming for was within Chinese territory, so the immigration process wasn't too complicated. The locals were mainly Tibetans, and a small group called the Yingula people. Because there weren't many of them, they weren't officially classified as a minority group. The owner of the homestay we stayed at was a Yingula. When he heard we were going to climb, he enthusiastically approached us to explain some knowledge about the Holler Mountains. "Do you guys know what Holler means?" he asked. Sophia guessed. "Does it mean pure white?" "No." The owner shook his head, speaking in broken English. Caleb's friend Henry thought for a moment. "Does it mean awesome?" The owner hesitated. "Something like that." "I got it." Another of Caleb's friends, a rich second generation named Jack, chimed in. "It means God." "Exactly." The owner gave a thumbs up. "Holler means God. This mountain range is our sacred mountain, protecting us to live better lives. So, when you guys climb, you need to respect the peaks so the gods will watch over you." "So what does Helakla mean? Does it also mean God?" Nova laughed. The owner's expression suddenly darkened. His dark complexion suddenly turned somber, every wrinkle seeming to carry fear. "You guys are going to climb Helakla Mountain?" I sensed something was off and pressed. "Boss, what does Helakla mean? Is it bad?" The owner lowered his head, his scattered hair hiding his eyes, making his expression unreadable. After a moment, he whispered, "Helakla means death. Helakla Mountain is the mountain of death. No one who climbs that mountain ever comes back alive." His words felt like a cold shower, instantly dousing my excitement and enthusiasm. I wanted to change mountains, but everyone seemed indifferent to the mountain's name. "Don't worry," Jack tried to comfort. "Maybe it's just superstition. We're all atheists, no gods or ghosts or anything." Olivia was a bit dismissive. She pulled out the photos and showed me, "Look how beautiful this mountain is. How can it be the mountain of death? Besides, all those things he mentioned are from the past. Since an accident decades ago, no one has climbed this mountain. It's only been recently reopened." "Decades ago, teams climbed without any proper gear. Isn't it bound to be deadly?" Olivia continued. "Yeah," Caleb agreed. "The equipment we have now is top-notch. The first teams in recent decades have made a name for themselves." I pressed my lips together, remaining silent. Since everyone decided to go, I couldn't oppose anymore. I comforted myself. Olivia was right. It's just superstition. Could it really be that climbing the mountain of death would mean certain doom? That's too wild. When she lifted her head, I broke into a cold sweat. This woman had a face exactly like mine. I jolted upright, my forehead soaked with cold sweat. It was midnight, and the outside was pitch black. The curtains weren't tightly closed, and through the gap, the distant snow mountain cast a dark, menacing silhouette against the night, like a lurking beast waiting to devour its prey. I suddenly felt terrified and glanced around. One look and I was stunned. There weren't many rooms in the homestay. Except for Caleb, everyone else was sleeping in pairs. Olivia and Caleb weren't sleeping together. Olivia didn't support premarital sex. She and Caleb had been together for 2 years, without ever sharing a room, so she was staying with Sophia, while Sophia and I were in the same room. But now the bed to my left was empty. Nova wasn't on the bed. In an instant, a chill ran down my spine. Earlier nightmares, the snowy mountain at night, and the missing Nova, all flooding my mind. Fear took over my brain, making me freeze, unable to move or think, just lying still on the bed with open eyes. After what felt like forever, the sound of keys turning echoed at the door. My gaze shifted to the lock, which moved slightly as a shadow silently pushed the door open. I stared intently at the figure entering. Through the faint moonlight outside, I saw her curvy figure. She was removing her jacket, tiptoeing onto the bed. My body went rigid, cold sweat dripping down my forehead onto the pillow. It was Nova. But then I realized the room had a separate bathroom. What was Nova doing out in the middle of the night? The next morning, Caleb came knocking on the door. After breakfast, the rest of us followed him to the foot of the mountain. Honestly, Helakla Mountain was stunningly beautiful. The biting wind swept away all the impurities in the air, leaving a clear, vast blue sky. Standing in front of Helakla Mountain, its majestic presence was beyond what any photo could capture. The mountain stood tall against the pristine blue, exuding a dreamy solemnity and beauty. The temperature had already dropped below 0, and the icy wind cut through our faces like a knife. But everyone was excited, taking endless photos with their phones. My lingering anxiety was blown away by the group's enthusiasm, and I felt a bit more cheerful. At first, the path was easy, but Olivia began to pester Caleb. "I'm scared, please hold my hand." Caleb gave a weary laugh, tightened his grip on Olivia's hand. Strangely, he glanced back at Nova. Wearing his mountaineering sunglasses, I couldn't see his eyes clearly, but it seemed his gaze lingered on Nova for a moment. A sudden thought crossed my mind. Maybe Nova went out at midnight to find Caleb. But I shook off the wild thoughts. How could that be? We were all first-timers climbing a snow mountain. Although Hilakla was just over 1,000 meters, it was still somewhat challenging. We weren't really climbing to reach the summit. We were more like snow mountain strolling. We weren't in a hurry to reach the top. The main goal was to enjoy the scenic beauty. Our initial plan was to stay on the mountain for 2 to 3 nights and then descend. The snow on the mountain was hard-packed and covered with thick layers of ice, making each step tricky. Stepping into deep snow felt like sinking into quicksand, and soon my shoes were soaking wet, my toes beginning to sting. Olivia pouted. "I can't walk anymore, darling. Let's take a break." Caleb stopped, looked around, and pointed to a raised rock. "All right, let's stop here for tonight and set up camp. We can continue tomorrow." Olivia tried to lean against him, but Caleb awkwardly pushed her away. "There's someone, let's move." I was trailing behind, clearly seeing Nova staring towards Caleb's direction. This confirmed my suspicion. Something was up between the two of them. I frowned, feeling a bit annoyed. The 3-legged man is all over the place. Why does he have to steal people right next to him? Previously, I couldn't tell Nova was this kind of person. Although she wasn't well off and sometimes took small perks, it wasn't a big deal. But Olivia and Caleb had been together for 2 years, about to graduate and get married, and now Olivia was inserting herself like this. I hesitated about whether to warn Olivia, but without concrete evidence I couldn't say anything. I didn't expect this to blow up so quickly. As the evening sun dyed the snow mountains with a golden hue, clouds and sunset colours churned together, looking like a painting. We stood on a rock halfway up the mountain taking photos, the sound of the shutter clicking all around us. Now I understand why the Yingula people call this mountain sacred. Standing here, facing the pure white snow-covered peaks, breathing the crisp, cold air, I felt completely purified. Suddenly, Jack approached and whispered, "Isn't it beautiful?" "Yeah." I nodded. I thought he'd say something like, "It gets better with time," but instead, he looked at the distant mountain range and sunset and sighed. "Hilakla Mountain is really beautiful. I've climbed quite a few mountains before, but I've never seen scenery this gorgeous." "Yeah, but why would such a mountain be the mountain of death?" Jack thought for a moment, tilting his head. "Maybe because the most beautiful things are the most dangerous." He even started singing, making me laugh. "Let's go, time to set up camp." He saw me laughing and gave a small smile, motioning for me to head back. I followed him to set up camp, but saw Henry and Sophia arguing not far away. Sophia, holding a rope, shouted, "Isn't it just letting you tie a rope? Aren't you even a man anymore?" Henry sneered, "Never seen someone act so cocky when asking for help. Don't have the guts? Then do it yourself." He threw the rope aside and turned to leave. Sophia's eyes were red, glaring at his back, cursing, "What the hell is that?" "You fucker, what are you talking about?" Henry turned around, a fierce look in his eyes. He was already burly, with dark skin that made him look like a black bear from afar. Now, in this fit of rage, he looked even more terrifying. Henry spat on the ground, pointing at Sophia. "Do you believe I'll punch you? Look at your ugly face, I'm scared of you, might have nightmares at night." We quickly intervened to break up the fight. Jack pulled Henry away. "Cut it out, man!" I helped Sophia, who was wiping away tears, into an already set-up tent. "What's going on? Did you see something and start arguing like that?" Sophia wiped her tears, ice crystals forming as her eyes swelled and she choked. "Never seen such a dumbass man." "I saw him tying a rope for Nova, so I asked him to help me too. Who would have thought he didn't even glance at me, telling me to handle my own stuff?" Then why did he help Nova? Was it because she was pretty? Sophia's tears kept flowing, her fists clenched tight. Damn it. Just because you're pretty doesn't mean anything. Don't think I haven't seen it. She's been flirting with Caleb, damn it, shameless. I knew she was just venting, but she was so angry I could only pat her back to comfort her. All right, don't be mad. It's not worth it. I'll help you tie the rope in a bit, okay? Sophia didn't respond, biting her lip tightly. I sighed inwardly. Actually, the feud between Sophia and Nova had been brewing for a long time. To be fair, Sophia wasn't particularly attractive, with dark skin, small eyes and buck teeth. She had previously had a crush on a senior, pursued him for months, bringing him food and water, being extremely diligent. But unexpectedly, the senior led her on, and then confessed to Nova, saying he couldn't stand someone like Sophia who was clingy. I don't know how Sophia found out about this, but their relationship cooled down as a result. However, Sophia has a sharp tongue but a soft heart, quickly letting go of the issue. Who knew she'd pull this stunt today? I poured her a cup of hot water, planning to go out and check, but when I stepped out I saw Nova standing at the tent entrance. She was holding a thermos, standing there for who knows how long. Seeing me come out, a hint of embarrassment flashed across her face. She glanced at me and then turned to leave. Looks like she heard what Sophia said earlier. What's going on? On the first day, everything was already a mess. I felt uneasy, finished eating, and went back to lie down in the tent. But little did I know, things were about to get even crazier. In the middle of the night, the adjacent tent suddenly lit up. I crawled out of my sleeping bag, nudging Sophia beside me. What's going on? The flashlight beam swung around and I got a bit scared. Pulling Sophia forward, we peeked out of the tent. Using the flashlight's light, I saw two people tearing each other apart in the distance. Olivia, with a crying voice, yelled, "You bitch, do you have no shame? Stealing someone else's boyfriend, are you that desperate?" I was stunned. Olivia had always been a girl who never used profanity. Hearing her say such things meant she was genuinely pissed off. I turned to Sophia, and we exchanged a look, both understanding the fear in each other's eyes. Most likely, Nova had gone to Caleb's tent again at midnight, and Olivia had found her. Olivia, gripping Nova's hair fiercely, growled, "You dogs, you really have no shame." Nova, hurt but furious, retaliated by pulling Olivia's hair. "You two aren't even married. Is it wrong for Caleb and me to like each other? You don't even notice your own body. If I were a man, I'd be too scared to look at you. Might even have nightmares." The two of them were fighting each other, while Caleb stood there dumbfounded, muttering, "Stop it, stop it." In the end, a strand of Nova's hair was ripped off, and Olivia was left with a bruise on her face. The cold winds of the snowy mountain could freeze a person's bones, and both women barely wore any clothes, so they each returned to their tents, shivering. Before leaving, Olivia glanced at Caleb and coldly said, "I'm getting off the mountain tomorrow. You two lovebirds can die here on the mountain." We all thought she was just angry, and that was just a passing comment. But the next morning, when everyone got up, Olivia was nowhere to be seen. I thought she was still mad and planned to open her tent to talk to her. But as soon as I stepped into her tent, I was stunned. The tent door was already open and the sleeping bags were empty. Olivia was missing. My first thought was that she went out to find a place to use the bathroom, but we searched the nearby area and couldn't find any trace of her. The mountain tomorrow. You two lovebirds can die here on the mountain. We all thought she was just angry, and that was just a passing comment. But the next morning, when everyone got up, Olivia was nowhere to be seen. Caleb's face darkened, hesitating. She probably went down the mountain by herself, right? No way, Jack rebutted. All her stuff is still here except for her clothes. She didn't take anything. Yeah. Henry bent down and pulled out 2 trekking poles from the tent. She didn't bring these. If she went down, she's not going down, she's looking for death. Where could a strong person even go? We all started to get anxious. Sophia nudged me quietly. Do you think Olivia couldn't take the blow and decided to... She didn't finish, but I understood her meaning. Regardless, if she's still alive, alone on this snow mountain with no gear, she wouldn't last long. Whether she jumped off a cliff or left in anger, it's not something we can handle. Jack quickly packed up and told us, "There's no signal here. We need to hurry down and request rescue. Let's go." When we came up, everyone was cheerful and excited, but now everyone had a serious expression, not saying a word. We didn't want to imagine the worst-case scenario, even though we all knew it. Olivia was just a small girl without much strength, with nothing on her. She couldn't survive on this snow mountain. Suddenly, I remembered something the homestay owner told us before we left. After a while, he whispered, "Helakla means death. Helakla Mountain is the mountain of death. No one who climbs that mountain ever comes back alive." We only took less than a day to climb the mountain, but strangely, even by 6 p.m. we hadn't seen the base yet. All we saw was endless white snow, making it seem like we were still halfway up the mountain. Henry looked a bit troubled. "I feel something's off." Jack noticed the problem too and turned to Caleb. "Argy, is the route you brought okay? We've already walked an hour more than when we went up." Caleb panicked. "How could there be a problem? I've climbed over 100 mountains, even more than 50, and I've been following the same route all the way up." "Look." He pulled out a mountaineering compass, and the rest of his words were stuck in his throat. The compass needle was spinning wildly. "No, no way!" Caleb looked terrified. "It was working fine just now." We all exchanged worried glances, panicking inside. It seemed like we were lost. The wind howled fiercely, mixing with swirling ice and snow. Even with a face mask on, my face felt like it was being scraped raw. Jack glanced at the sky, his voice heavy. "A blizzard is coming, we need to find a place to take shelter quickly." We had to hurry down, and many things weren't packed. Everyone only had 2 tents left on their bodies. Henry went down into the storm for a bit, then came back to call us. His voice was distorted by the fierce wind. "There's a place ahead, follow me." We barely managed to set up the tent in a sheltered spot, and by the time we got inside, my hands were numb from the initial sting. Luckily, the water in the thermos was still warm. I wrapped myself tighter in the sleeping bag and took a few sips of water, finally feeling a bit better. The tent was supposed to hold 2 people, but now 3 were crammed inside, making it cramped and hard to turn around. After a moment of silence, Sophia spoke up. "Olivia! Can Olivia still be alive?" Her voice was shaky. I didn't say anything, and Nova beside me lowered her head, her body trembling slightly. If she had any hope before, after this blizzard, Olivia had no chance of survival. She didn't bring a tent, sleeping bag, food or water when she left. It was like last night. She just walked into the endless night wearing nothing but her clothes. I didn't think she was the type to commit suicide after being betrayed by her boyfriend. Plus, she said last night that she was planning to go down the mountain today. So what happened at midnight that made Olivia leave without a second thought? I glanced at Nova, who was softly sobbing. Or maybe, was she actually murdered? Things were getting more complicated. The outside wind and snow noise grew louder, with the fierce wind whipping ice and snow into the tent, clattering loudly. I huddled in my sleeping bag, staring blankly at the tent's roof. Everything was spiraling out of control. This mountain of death had given us a harsh lesson on the very first day we climbed it. No one who climbs this mountain ever makes it back alive. Now, Olivia was the first to confirm this. What about us? Can we survive? My mind was in turmoil. Night fell quickly, but the outside storm showed no signs of easing. We hastily ate some instant food and went to sleep. In the pitch-black night, the wind howled like some wild beast's roar. I was scared, snuggling closer with Sophia. "Hey, Ava, wake up!" After what felt like ages, someone nudged me awake. Groggily, I sat up. Sophia, wearing her jacket, looked pale. "The tent's about to collapse." I jolted awake. The wind outside had died down a bit, but the tent was already crooked, making a harsh squeaking sound. "Get out now!" She grabbed me and pulled Nova out of the tent. As soon as we stepped out, the tent crashed down to the ground with a loud bang. I approached cautiously, seeing that maybe because of the strong wind, one of the ropes on the left side had come loose. Thankfully, the overall structure was still intact. Jack and Caleb came over to help us retighten the tent. After securing the tent, Caleb pulled out his compass and looked at it. The needle was still spinning rapidly, showing no signs of stopping. In the dead of night, everyone exchanged glances, a chill running through our bodies. "What the hell is going on here?" Henry grabbed the compass and shook it forcefully. "Is this thing broken?" Jack didn't say a word, pulling out an identical mountaineering compass from his pocket. Its needle spun furiously. The snow-covered mountain in the night looked rugged and bizarre, resembling a sprawling monster with a blood-stained, gaping mouth. Caleb turned back to the tent, pulling out a signal gun. "No choice. Let's try signalling for help. Maybe someone will see us." He fired 3 bright flares into the sky, the blinding light exploding upwards. He stuffed the gun back into his pocket, forcing an awkward smile. "Go back to sleep. Maybe a helicopter will pick us up first thing in the morning." We held on to a faint hope that this nightmare would end soon, and that we could descend the mountain smoothly the next morning. But for some reason, I felt an underlying unease pressing down on me. In my dream, the woman with a face just like mine appeared again in my mind. "You can't leave, stay here." The next morning, we all got up early, waiting quietly in place, hoping someone would come to rescue us. But by afternoon, there was still no sign. Not even a helicopter, not a single bird in sight. "We can't keep waiting like this," Jack said seriously. "We don't have much gear left. We need to hurry down the mountain." Earlier, to save time, we had left most of our gear halfway up the mountain. After a quick pack-up, we gathered all the remaining stuff and headed out. "Where do we go next?" Caleb looked at Jack. Jack gave a wry smile. "I don't know." Sophia got impatient. "I saw on TV they use shadows or stars to navigate. Don't you guys know how to do that?" Jack didn't respond, looking a bit upset. I thought he was annoyed by Sophia. Just as I was about to lighten the mood, he lowered his head and whispered, "This place is messed up. The stars are different." "What do you mean by that?" Caleb stormed over, staring at Jack. "What do you mean the stars are different?" Jack looked around at us, pursed his lips. "After the snow stopped last night, I tried to use the stars to navigate." His voice trembled. "But the stars here are completely different from what we saw before." Jack lifted his head, his face showing uncontrollable fear. "I suspect this isn't Halakla Mountain at all." "What do you mean?" Henry also came over, gripping his trekking pole tightly. Jack wiped his face, looking up at the sky. "The stars here. I've never seen them before. They're totally different from what we know." He wore a smile that looked worse than crying. "There's no way all the stars I know just disappeared overnight, right? There's not even the North Star." Everyone fell silent. After a while, Sophia trembled. "Is it possible we just misread it? We're climbing Halakla Mountain, aren't we? The sign is right at the base. Then why, after walking so long, haven't we descended?" Nova stepped beside Caleb, speaking in a low voice. We're all silent. The 6 of us remained silent. We didn't know where to go. The compass was malfunctioning, phones had no signal, and our gear was left halfway up the mountain. A blizzard could strike again at any moment, and we didn't even have enough food for tomorrow. Should we keep going down or return to the mountain halfway to grab more supplies? For a moment, no one spoke. The atmosphere was suffocatingly silent. What do we do? Jack opened the conversation first. Do we keep going down or go back up to get stuff? Caleb didn't respond, looking at Henry beside him. The 3 of us women hadn't climbed snow mountains before. We were confused, and had no choice but to listen to the experienced guys. Henry countered, "What do you think?" "I think we should go up. This mountain is kinda weird." Jack frowned. "Whether we're lost or experiencing a ghostly wall, if we can't get down, we're dead here." Henry glanced at him. "I also think we should go up. Arji, what do you say?" Caleb hesitated for a moment. We all knew he desperately wanted to go down to find rescue for Olivia. Although we didn't think Olivia could survive last night's blizzard, just in case. But unexpectedly he paused, glanced at Nova and said, "I agree. We should go up. Going down, we don't know how long it will take or if we can even get out." He quickly found a reason for himself. I watched Nova standing beside him, their close relationship making me feel a bit disgusted. Olivia and Caleb had been together for 2 years, even met each other's parents. Now, in this group, the only one with a reason to insist on rescuing Olivia was him, but he didn't dare to do anything. So everyone agreed to return along the same path to the mountain halfway up, carrying our gear. After the snowstorm, the ground that was once compacted was now covered with thick layers of ice and snow, making it hard to walk. Each step felt like sinking into the snow. Half a calf buried. Pulling out didn't last long before the cold seeped into my bones. Luckily, most of the path ahead was a gentle slope, no crevices, just thick snow with no real danger. Last night was so windy. Do you think the tent got blown away? Caleb was worried. No way. Henry pulled his legs out of the snow. The tents were all tied down tight and placed in sheltered spots. They should be fine. We'll camp here tonight and pack up our stuff tomorrow before descending. Caleb nodded, about to speak, but suddenly froze. Henry noticed his hesitation and turned around. What's wrong? Caleb didn't say anything. After a long pause, he stiffly raised one hand, pointing to the snowy ground not far away. Look over there. Do you see a set of footprints? Upon hearing him say that, we were all stunned. The extreme cold crept down my neck. I turned to look, and sure enough, there were some subtle depressions on the right side of the snowfield that were hard to notice at first glance. Jack turned to look at us and was the first to walk over. We followed him closely. These were indeed footprints, but they were strange, didn't look like beast claws or human footprints. A long scratch snaked into a nearby red pine forest, as if something was crawling along the ground, leaving marks. A chill ran through me, an unsettling thought crossed my mind. It's like something was crawling on the ground, leaving these marks. Sophia's voice had a quivering edge. What the hell is this thing? Is it a yeti? Stop with the bullshit, Henry snapped, sounding impatient. Can you stop freaking out? Have you been reading too many creepypastas? Where'd you get this fuck yeti nonsense? His voice was laced with anger and fear, unable to hide his terror. The footprints were fresh, meaning the thing had just passed by. Looking at the snow-covered forest, the heavy snow blocked the sunlight, making the woods dark and unclear. Maybe now, that thing was hiding in the shadows, silently watching us. It should be some kind of animal, Jack started. I saw a video of an otter sliding through the snow, leaving these long trails. Don't scare yourself. Maybe it's just a passing animal. I didn't agree. The footprints were too wide to be left by an otter, and maybe it's me overthinking, but I felt the edges of the footprints were a bit sharp. Clearly, Jack was just comforting himself, swallowing his saliva, and quietly said, "Let's hurry and move." The rest of the way up, everyone fell silent, their hearts filled with panic. Ever since we climbed this mountain, strange things hadn't stopped. The shadow of the mountain of death loomed over each of us. Luckily, Caleb remembered the path clearly. As dusk approached, we finally saw the place where we had set up camp the day before. I heard Henry breathe a deep sigh of relief. Thank goodness we have all our stuff. If we couldn't go down or up, we'd be dead here for sure. A few of us quickened our pace towards the tent, but the further we went, the weirder things got. Slowly, everyone stopped. In a suffocating silence, Caleb's dry voice echoed, "How many tents did we take this morning?" Jack paused for a moment. 2. Then, we brought 4 tents in total, took 2, so there should be 2 left. He pointed to 4 tents not far away, his eyes wide with fear. Where did the extra 2 come from? At a rocky sheltered spot about 10 meters from us, 4 tents stood silently in dim light. Everyone fell silent, staring hard at those tents. No way! Henry touched his pack, stuttering. This can't be! Yeah, this is impossible. How could there be 2 more tents overnight? Don't panic, Jack said. Maybe another group came up after us and set up camp here. Let's go check it out. How likely is that? We just walked, and they came right after us, setting up camp in the same spot. Plus, their tents are the same style as ours. I felt like a heavy stone was crushing my chest, making it hard to breathe, but I still followed Jack a few steps forward. We had no choice. If we didn't replenish our supplies today, we'd all die here. As we entered the camp, An eerie feeling washed over me. The tent styles, colours, and their items were exactly like ours. Even the placement of things inside was just like our memories, except for those 2 extra tents. All the tents were open, with no one inside, just empty sleeping bags. Looking at the other tents, they were all the same. "This isn't our campsite," Nova whispered. "No way!" Sophia countered. "Look, all these are our stuff we left behind." She didn't finish her sentence because Nova held up something, a pink mountaineering jacket, exactly like the one she was wearing. "This is what I found in the tent just now. This definitely isn't our previous campsite." Caleb also came crawling out of a tent holding a camera identical to the one hanging on his chest, his face pale. What the hell is going on? How could a group have identical gear to ours? And most importantly, where are the people? Clearly the others realised this too. Henry looked around, lowering his voice. "Where did these people go?" Yeah, this group didn't wear mountaineering jackets or take sleeping bags. In such freezing conditions, where could they possibly have gone? It was like they encountered some danger and fled without taking anything. "Check this out." Jack squatted by a tent, looking upset. That tent was completely torn open and sagging outwards. Strange, the zipper was right next to it. Why would someone rip the tent open? Unless, I exchanged a look with Jack. Unless they were in such an emergency that they couldn't zip up and had to break open the tent. Or maybe the tent wasn't even torn by a human. Thinking about the strange footprints we saw earlier, I felt a sinking feeling. Jack pressed his lips tightly and suddenly stood up. "Pack up! We need to leave now." No matter if the tent was torn open by humans or something else, it showed that this group must have encountered some kind of danger they couldn't handle. This time, no one complained or talked. Everyone hurriedly packed up whatever they could carry and strapped everything onto their backs. As dusk approached, climbing a snow mountain at night was pure suicide. After some discussion, we decided to follow the same path we came up to go down the mountain. When the last sliver of morning light disappeared on the horizon, we finally reached a rocky depression. Although it wasn't as good as the spot above, it was at least somewhat safer. After eating a bit of food, we all huddled back into the tent. It was already pitch black outside. The tent was our only source of security. Earlier, I had grabbed a camera from above, planning to open it and see what these people had captured. But the camera wouldn't turn on no matter how long I pressed the button. I didn't know if it was broken or just dead. Fuck. I was a bit frustrated, about to throw it aside, but then I remembered Sophia's camera looked pretty much the same. "Sophia," I nudged her. "Where's your camera? Lend me yours." Sophia fumbled in her bag for a while and handed me her camera, looking curious. "What are you doing?" "I found a camera up there, but it's dead. Let me see if your battery works." "Impossible. How could the camera's battery—" She watched helplessly as I swapped the batteries and held down the power button. The camera flickered to life. This is so crazy! It's exactly like mine!" I didn't say anything. It was too coincidental. Why did this group have gear identical to ours? Could it really just be a coincidence? The camera's indicator light blinked once and then slowly powered up. Sophia and Nova sat beside me, peering at the screen. I pressed the button, took a deep breath. Maybe the photos here could tell us what happened to them, but I didn't expect the first photo to leave me speechless. There were no people in the photo, just a flag waving at the mountain peak overlooking the ground below. The flag read, December 26, 2021, Hyerden Mountain Summit. I stared blankly at Sophia. December 26, 2021, that was yesterday. But where is Hyerden? Why did this group plant a Hyerden flag on Helakla Mountain's peak? My body started to shiver. A cold feeling swept through me. So, is this mountain Helakla or Hyerden? Late at night, gathered together, the 6 of us bent over and huddled in a tent, looking miserable. Henry put down the camera, his face dark. "Where's Hyerden? Have you guys heard of it?" Nova pondered for a moment. Could it be that the locals don't want us to climb this mountain, and the guide deliberately led us the wrong way? Possible. Caleb nodded, pulling out a booklet. This mountaineering guide has a summary of the Holler mountain ranges. Let's find it. I caught a glimpse of Jack frowning, staring hard at the camera. Maybe the two of us thought the same thing. Hyerden wouldn't be found in the booklet. If even the stars have changed, does this mountain truly exist in our world? Sure enough, Caleb found the mountain ranges summary page. The darker he read, the worse his face looked. I saw his hand trembling as he pointed to the page, incredulously pulling it up to read again and again. Finally, he looked up, face pale, lips quivering. There's no Hyerden in here. So where are we? Let's look further down. Maybe there's some misunderstanding. I held onto a faint hope and continued flipping through the camera. The photographers seemed to prefer capturing landscapes over people. They had taken many beautiful snow mountain photos from the summit. But now, even the most beautiful scenery looked terrifying to us. I flipped through quickly, then paused suddenly. A video seemed off. I rewound and watched it again. It was just a regular snowy landscape, like the other photos. But I still felt something was wrong, so I flipped through the previous photos again. Nova, leaning closer, pointed at the screen, voice trembling. Ava, I feel like something just ran past in that video. I noticed it too. In the video, a black dot dashed across the snowfield at incredible speed, disappearing instantly from the screen. I looked up at Nova, her pupils dilated, reflecting my terrified face. Jack took the camera and examined it closely, puzzled. Could it be a bear? That thing looks pretty big. Bears? Henry frowned. Aren't bears supposed to hibernate at this time? Could it be that this bear didn't hibernate and attack their camp? Caleb continued. They set up camp halfway up yesterday, and suddenly a bear attacked them. In a panic, they didn't grab anything and tore through the tent to escape. Maybe. Those footprints we saw yesterday should be from the bear sliding through the snow, he added, sounding urgent, as if trying to convince us and himself. Yeah, compared to an unknown, mysterious, dangerous creature, bears, while dangerous, aren't as terrifying. We had signal lights, knives, alcohol and fire. If we really encountered a bear, maybe we'd be okay. Then we have to keep someone to guard the tent at night, Jack said. If a bear comes at midnight again, we can only wait to die. The guard needs to carry a signal gun and weapons. Yeah, and we need to keep the fire going. Bears are scared of fire. Night had already fallen, and we didn't dare go to the red pine forest. Luckily, we could light up the alcohol stove we had collected earlier. Caleb first spoke. So, Jack and I will guard the first half of the night, and Henry will guard the second half. The girls don't have to stay up guarding. Not gonna happen, Jack said. If you skip a night, we have to come down tomorrow and you can't handle it. Yeah, Jack and I will guard the first half, and Henry and I will guard the second half. Henry approached. It's settled. I'm strong enough to handle it. Henry was indeed the strongest among us, nearly 7 feet tall, muscles bulging like a tower. All right then, Jack said, pulling open the tent and stepping out. The snowy mountain winds were bone-chilling. Even in a sheltered spot, the tent felt like an icebox. I huddled in my sleeping bag, teeth chattering uncontrollably, unable to sleep. Ava. Sophia nudged me, feeling a bit embarrassed. I need to go to the bathroom. Can you come with me? I didn't want to, but hearing her say that, I suddenly felt a bit of urgency. Sure, let's go. Nova, are you coming? Nova didn't say anything. After a while, she whispered, I'm not going. At times like this, we didn't care about feeling embarrassed. We quickly pulled up the tent and hid behind a rock to take care of business. Oh my God, it's so cold! My butt's frozen! Sophia fumbled to pull up her pants. I wiped my hands on the snow, about to say something, when I suddenly noticed a blinding flash of light rise up from the distant sky. An orange glow shot into the sky, lighting up a section of the sky. What is that? Sophia leaned in beside me, her voice trembling. I stared at it for a moment and hesitated. Looks like a flare. Everyone except Nova and Caleb, who were still inside the tent, saw the flash of light. That's probably a flare, Caleb confirmed. "Looks like the group on the mountainside is still alive. Thank God." "Yeah, thank God. We weren't the only ones trapped on the mountain. If we could meet up with them, maybe we'd figure out what's going on with this mountain." "Let's get some sleep." Jack handed me a thermos. "Hot water, just boiled. We need to rest for tomorrow, still got a long way to go." I felt warmth in my chest and nodded gently. It's hard to sleep on the mountain. It's too cold and the wind is howling. Plus, we never knew when a bear might show up. We didn't even dare to zip up our sleeping bags completely. Luckily, the light from the fire outside kept burning, offering a little reassurance. Half awake and half asleep, I saw the fire flicker and a shadow stood up. It looked like Jack. Another figure with longer hair sat down to the side. Looks like Jack and Caleb were switching shifts. Before long, the fire flared up again. Caleb must have added some alcohol. The warm glow seemed to bring a bit of comfort to the cold night, and with that small bit of psychological reassurance, I finally drifted into a deep sleep. The next morning, I was woken up by a sharp scream. It was Caleb's voice. I thought a bear had come, and I sprang up in a panic, scrambling to crawl out of the tent. By the time I reached the campsite with Sophia and Nova, I didn't see any bears. Only Caleb sitting on the ground, his face as white as the snow. Jack, his hair a mess, rushed out in a few quick steps and shouted, "What happened?" Caleb sat there, stiff, pointing at the snow with a dazed expression. Henry's gone." We followed his finger and looked over. There, a long, dragging mark stretched into the red pine forest in the distance. Henry had been dragged away by something. "What the hell happened?" Jack's face drained of colour. "You were on watch with him, right?" Caleb burst into tears, his face a mixture of fear and madness, contorting as he spoke. "I went to the bathroom just for a minute. I came back and he was gone." My heart sank. In just a minute, whatever it was had dragged the lone Henry away. It had been lurking nearby, watching us. The thought that while I was asleep, some unknown creature was hiding in the nearby red pine forest, watching us, made me shiver. "This is impossible. Henry's built like a tank. If it had been a bear, he could have at least shouted, right?" There were no signs of a struggle, just a dragging mark in the snow. This meant Henry hadn't fought back at all. He'd been dragged away without a sound. What kind of creature could drag a 1.9-metre tall, solid guy away without him even yelling? I could hear Caleb's teeth chattering from a distance, and Sophia and Nova's faces had turned pale. Jack took a deep breath, his voice barely audible in the wind. Maybe that thing never really left. It's been following us down the mountain, just waiting for someone to get isolated. "We need to move quickly." He wiped his face, his voice pained. "While it's busy with Henry..." We were all frozen at those words. "While it's busy with Henry..." It sounded so cruel. But we all knew. None of us had the courage to go into the red pine forest to try and save him. Our only chance of survival was to escape by stepping over our comrade's body. Caleb scrambled up, still trembling, grabbed a bag from the tent and stammered, "Let's go. I just want to get off this mountain." He wasn't acting right. He was clearly in shock. But at that point, there was no time to worry about that. We packed up and followed Jack, moving quickly down the mountain. The sky hadn't even fully brightened yet, and the morning light was still obscured by the darkness. For some reason, I turned around and looked behind me. Had that thing really gone? As we moved downhill, we couldn't think about whether we'd make it off the mountain. The only thing that mattered was to get as far away as possible. The snowstorm wasn't too bad, and the path down wasn't too hard to follow. We came up with 7 people, but now only 5 remained, all of us weighed down with dread, none of us speaking. If Olivia's disappearance had been an accident, Henry's loss felt like a punch to the gut. This mountain of death had truly shown its terror. Ever since we arrived on this mountain, strange things hadn't stopped happening. Different names, a team that looked just like ours, monsters lurking in the snow, and the bizarre disappearance of Olivia. It felt as if something was trying to tell us that anyone who climbed this mountain wouldn't make it off alive. My stomach twisted, and a sharp ache spread through my chest. I hadn't eaten since morning, and I could feel the hunger, But we had no choice now. We didn't know how long Henry's body would hold off whatever that thing was. We had to move as far as we could, one step at a time. "Ava!" Sophia came up beside me, her breath ragged. "Do you think we'll get out of here today?" I could see the fear and hope in her eyes through my mountaineering goggles. I knew she just wanted me to say something comforting, even if it was a lie. I patted her shoulder and said, "Maybe we'll make it out soon. Tonight we'll take a hot bath." She nodded, trailing behind me, murmuring, "My parents must be worried sick about me." Sigh. Thinking about my own parents, my throat tightened, and I quickly buried my face and focused on walking down the mountain. I had never prayed for my life so desperately before, hoping that somehow I would be spared. I don't know how long we had been walking, but my legs felt numb, moving mechanically. My whole body felt like it was on fire, or maybe it was just numb from exhaustion. Nova, who was trailing behind, collapsed onto the snow after twisting her ankle. She gasped weakly, reaching out her hand to Caleb. "Gee, help me up." But Caleb didn't seem to hear her, walking on with his head down. It was as though something was chasing him. Nova's hand hung in the air for a moment, and I rushed over to pull her up. "Hang in there. We might get out of here soon." She leaned close to my ear and said with a sarcastic laugh, "Ava, you must think I'm pathetic, right?" I gave a half-hearted reply. "Of course not. Let's keep moving." Nova shook her head. "We're not getting out. There's something wrong with this play." I felt uneasy, already terrified, and then Nova started saying things like that. My tone became harsh without thinking. "How do you know we can't get out if we don't try? Standing here won't get us anywhere." Nova gave a bitter laugh. "I'm not trying to make things worse. It's just, I feel like my body's changing." "What do you mean?" I asked, my face going pale. "I can't really explain it," she panted, speaking softly. "You know my stamina, but since we got on the mountain yesterday, I've felt like all my strength's been drained away. I'm so weak. I can't explain it. It's like someone's stolen the life out of me, like they want me to die." I took off my gloves and touched her forehead, checking for a fever, but her skin was as cold as ice, just like mine, and I couldn't feel anything. I tried to reassure her. "You're overthinking it. You're just exhausted from the hike and we haven't eaten. Let's rest for a bit. We'll feel better." She didn't say anything more, just gently rested her head on my shoulder. After a moment, Nova whispered, "The password for my phone and PayPal is 380206. If I don't make it out, can you send the 30,000 RMB in my account to my little brother?" Her voice sounded like she was giving her last words. A wave of unease rushed through me, and I grabbed her hand tightly, raising my voice. "If you want to give it away, you do it yourself. Get a grip." Jack came back from the front, glanced at Nova and said seriously, "She's not in good shape. We've been walking all day without food. Let's camp here." Caleb followed Jack back, shouting, "Are you crazy? What if that thing is still following us?" I gave him a look. I knew Caleb was a jerk, but I didn't expect him to be this much of a jerk. His girlfriend went missing, and he didn't even look for her. Now, with his partner in trouble, he still didn't care, and wanted to keep going. "Look at Nova," Jack yelled. "If we keep walking, she'll die. If we don't keep going, we'll all die." Caleb's eyes flashed with fear. "That thing could still be following us." Sophia couldn't hold back anymore and mocked him. "If it's really following us, then we're dead no matter where we go. It's already 6 or 7 in the evening, and we haven't even seen the foot of the mountain. Don't you see we can't get out of here?" "Shut the hell up!" Caleb's face turned red, veins bulging on his forehead. "We're just lost. Someone's going to rescue us sooner or later." I exchanged a look with Jack. Caleb was clearly terrified from what happened this morning, but his state was getting worse. "If you want to go, then go ahead. We're not going." Sophia supported Nova from the other side, speaking softly to her. I saw a single tear slide down Nova's goggle. Maybe she hadn't expected that at a time like this. The man who once whispered sweet words to her would now wish her dead, while the roommate she'd fought with would stop everything to help her. "Jack, say something. This is crazy." Caleb looked at Jack urgently. Jack glanced at him and said in a low voice, "Sophia's right. If that thing is still following us, it won't matter where we go. We're down to just 5 of us. We can't afford to lose anyone else. Let's set up camp here." "No!" Caleb shouted. "That thing might be waiting to drag us off right now. Setting up camp here is suicide." Nova couldn't speak anymore. Jack ignored Caleb and set up the tent, hammering it into the snowbank. "Help her inside. Do we have any more hot water?" Caleb was fuming, huffing and puffing as he pointed at the rest of us. "You guys can't be reasoned with. If you want to die, go ahead." "Don't worry," Sophia said coldly as she helped Nova into the tent. "If you die, we won't." "Fine, fine." Caleb couldn't even form words anymore. He shot us a furious look and stormed off. But only a few minutes later he turned back, his face ashen, throwing his stuff down on the ground with a crash. "Damn it!" We ignored him. The water in the thermos had been frozen all day and had ice crystals in it. I used the alcohol stove to heat up some more water for Nova. "Wake up. Drink some hot water." I gently nudged Nova's shoulder. She was slumped against the edge of her sleeping bag, her eyes tightly shut, not moving at all. I stared at her pale face, almost as white as paper, and a shiver ran through me. I hesitated for a moment, then shakily reached out and placed my hand under her nose. She was gone. We 4 stood around Nova's body in silence. The cold wind blew through the sturdy tent, and I could feel it all over my skin. My hair stood on end as I stared at the tipped-over thermos on the ground. "This can't be real!" Sophia stared at Nova, speaking softly. How could this be? She was fine just a moment ago. From when Nova collapsed to when we helped her into the tent, barely half an hour had passed. In less than 20 minutes, a living person had died right in front of us. Caleb completely broke down. He grabbed his hair and screamed, "The mountain of death!" "This is really a mountain of death. We're all going to die here." His face was twisted with despair, and his fingers were full of torn hair. No one argued with him. At that moment, we all truly felt the terrifying power of this mountain. 3 days. First Olivia, then Henry. Now Nova. Every day, one of us died. Who would it be tomorrow? I blankly glanced at the few people left. Would it be Jack, Sophia, Caleb, or me? After a long silence, Jack spoke. He rubbed his face roughly, speaking with difficulty. "Let's put her body outside." I looked up at him, understanding what he meant. I didn't know if that thing was still following us. Maybe it had finished with Henry. Now we would have to step over Nova's body to survive. I felt a heavy unease in my chest, but I didn't oppose the decision. I wasn't a fake saint. At any moment, living people are always more important than the dead. That night, I lay in the tent with Nova's body just a few feet away at a fork in the path. Strangely, I wasn't scared at all. Maybe the things we'd been through these past days had numbed me. The next morning, we continued our descent in complete silence. Jack and Caleb had stayed up all night, but fortunately that thing didn't come. Liu Xiaoyan's body was intact, just covered with a layer of frost. I gave her one last look, then picked up my bag and headed down the mountain. I thought that watching a comrade die in front of me was the scariest thing that could happen, but what happened later made me realise the terrifying part was far from over. See? The snow was deep and thick, and every step we took felt like a struggle. In some places, our feet would sink so deep we couldn't pull them out for ages. Honestly, we didn't even know where we were heading anymore. All of our navigation devices were completely dead. We were just relying on instinct to head downhill. Maybe because that thing didn't show up again yesterday, Caleb was doing a little better today. He wasn't running around like a maniac anymore. We slowly made our way down a relatively flat slope. The sun kept climbing higher, and the temperature was rising slightly compared to before. Caleb pulled the scarf off his face and took a drink of water. He hadn't even swallowed the first sip when his eyes went wide. He started coughing so violently that he couldn't catch his breath. His face turned red, and he was covering his mouth, coughing so hard his throat seemed like it was about to burst. The water in his hand slowly froze, dripping through his fingers. "What the hell?" Jack said, stepping behind him and slapping him on the back. Caleb coughed a few more times, and before he could get a word out, he pointed frantically to the side, but his throat was so blocked up, nothing came out. He shoved Jack aside and pulled out a pair of binoculars from his pack, staring intently into the distance. I was confused. I followed his line of sight, squinting to see what he was looking at. In the distance, there was a steep snowfield with black exposed rocks, and on one side, a red pine forest covered in snow. In front of the red pine forest, I froze. It looked like there were a few tiny black dots moving in front of the forest. Were they people? I was about to ask Caleb to hand me the binoculars when I turned to find him shaking uncontrollably. Caleb was trembling like he'd been electrocuted from head to toe. His hands gripped the binoculars so tightly they creaked under the pressure. What the hell was happening? I pushed him lightly, concerned. "Are you okay?" Caleb slowly lowered the binoculars. I noticed 2 round marks on his eyes where he'd pressed too hard. Kind of funny, but I didn't laugh. His eyes, though, were filled with terror, like he was about to burst into tears. Then, Caleb suddenly dropped the binoculars and took a stunned step back. Without warning, he bolted off to the side, running like he was being chased by something. "What the hell? Where are you going?" Jack shouted, chasing after him. The two of them quickly disappeared from sight. Sophia and I exchanged a look, both of us equally confused. What the hell was going on? What did Caleb see that scared him so badly? I picked up the binoculars from the snow, wiped them off, and raised them to my eyes. The 12x zoom gave a clear view. Even ants looked big. There in the distance, a group of 7 people was slowly making their way across the snow. It was really people. I almost shouted out in excitement, tightening my grip on the binoculars, squinting to see which way they were heading. If we could meet up with them, maybe we could get down the mountain. But just as I was about to lower the binoculars to share the good news with Sophia, a woman at the front of the group suddenly looked up. I froze. Then my hand holding the binoculars started shaking uncontrollably. I saw it. I knew what Caleb had seen that scared him so badly. I lowered the binoculars, pale as a ghost, and looked at Sophia. Sophia, frantic, asked, "What the hell is going on? Are you seeing aliens or something?" "It's not aliens." My voice came out dry and sharp. "It's Nova." "I saw Nova." Sophia's face went white. She grabbed the binoculars out of my hand and stared for a while. After a long silence, she lowered them, stunned. "This is insane," she whispered. "What the hell is going on with this cursed mountain?" We stood in the snow for over an hour, waiting. Finally, Jack came back, hunched over and out of breath. He didn't care about the cold, just plopped down in the snow, gasping for air. I glanced around. Caleb was nowhere to be seen. My stomach sank. "Where's Caleb?" Sophia crouched down, handing Jack a water bottle. Jack waved her off, looking grim. He ran. He ran too fast. I couldn't catch up. Out of nowhere, he just bolted straight into the forest. I thought if I didn't turn back now, I might not find him again. We'll camp by the trees tonight, see if he comes back. Jack caught his breath, puzzled. What the hell happened to him? What did he see? I hesitated and then looked at Sophia. Sophia swallowed hard, her voice barely a whisper. Nova. We saw Nova. She said Nova quietly, like she was afraid to even mention the name. Who? Nova? Jack's eyes widened. Did someone get dragged off? That'd be terrifying. No. Sophia's eyes were wide with fear. It was her. Alive. Nova's alive. The group had entered the red pine forest and was now out of sight. We'd thought about joining them, but now none of us dared to go anywhere near them. Who the hell were those people? Were they alive or dead? The three of us stood in the snow, each of us uncertain about what to do next. Sophia hesitated. Do you think it could be a loop? A loop? I frowned. What do you mean? Like, I'm just guessing. she said, testing the idea. What if we're stuck in some kind of time loop? Maybe the people we saw are us, in the next cycle. Jack furrowed his brows. No, that doesn't make sense. What about the group that disappeared on the mountain? Are they from our previous cycle or the next one? They had 4 tents, which means they came after us. That should be the next cycle. But we never ran into any of the stuff they went through. We didn't leave behind any supplies or anything. We came down because Olivia went missing. We didn't experience what they did. Sophia's eyes were red. Then what the hell is going on? What the hell is happening? Maybe you just saw it wrong, Jack said, trying to comfort her. Maybe those people just looked like Nova. You were using the binoculars from far away, so you could have been mistaken. I shook my head. No, I didn't. It wasn't just that they looked like Nova. The person was wearing her pink jacket. What about the others? Jack frowned. Did you see the rest of them? I paused. He had a point. I hadn't paid much attention to the others, just Nova. But now that Jack mentioned it, I realized something was off. That group was definitely different from us. They were 7 people, just like us, but their clothes didn't match ours exactly. Caleb's jacket was a bright purple, and we joked that it looked like a colour a gay guy would wear, but the group I saw didn't have that purple jacket. We were all stumped. None of us had any idea what was going on, so we decided to push forward, ignoring our confusion. We spent the rest of the day searching but still couldn't find a way down the mountain. In the end, we set up camp by the red pine forest, hoping Caleb would calm down and find his way back. Only 3 of us were left, Jack, Sophia and me, so we took turns keeping watch. Jack and I took the first shift, then we swapped with Sophia for the second half of the night. The pine branches we chopped for firewood crackled and smoked, the fire warming us against the dark, bone-chilling night. It stung our eyes, but we were grateful for the light. It kept the animals away and gave us a bit of comfort. The flames popped and crackled, and the orange glow lit the dark as Jack and I made small talk. So, what's your deal? A professional mountaineer? I asked curiously, since he had been such a rock throughout this ordeal. Jack laughed and tossed a stick into the fire. Nah, I'm just an amateur. I like to wander around when I have free time. Turns out wandering around is a good way to get yourself into trouble. He chuckled bitterly. This trip. I paid to die. I laughed weakly. Tell me about it. You got any idea what's going on? Jack asked. What do you think is happening? I looked up at the sky. The stars were beautiful here. They looked like shattered jewels scattered across the sky, and the air was clearer than anything I'd ever seen before. Who would have thought that beneath such a beautiful sky, we'd be trapped on this mountain of death? I thought for a moment, then said slowly, what if we're in a parallel universe? A parallel universe? Jack asked, confused. Yeah. I hesitated. Maybe the night we first arrived, we crossed into another dimension. That's why the stars look different, and the mountain's name has changed. Maybe in this universe, it's called Hyadan. And those people we saw, they're from a parallel climbing team. Olivia and Nova, maybe they were erased because their counterparts already exist here. Jack frowned. Then what about us? Is there another version of us in this universe? I shook my head. I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe we'll survive, maybe we'll be erased too. Jack went quiet for a while. Finally, he spoke again. So, why did Olivia leave? I don't know. I sighed. Who knows what this hellhole is all about? I'm just guessing. Maybe this place isn't what we think it is. Maybe it's some way of erasing us. He nodded. Makes sense. Nova had died in front of us, but now she was alive again. Parallel universes seemed like the only explanation. Jack muttered, That Caleb's a piece of work. You two barely got into any trouble, and he bolts first thing. You don't know, I nearly broke my neck trying to catch him. Jack kept cursing Caleb, but he was still watching the red pine forest path with a worried look on his face. Do you think he's going to make it out? I slapped him on the shoulder, trying to comfort him. Don't worry, he's not an idiot. He probably just got a shock. Once he's hungry enough, he'll figure out how to get out. Jack looked at me for a second, like he wanted to say something but stopped himself. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was probably wondering what would happen if Caleb ran into that thing, but he didn't want to scare me. I was scared too, so I didn't bring it up. What could it be that made the team on the mountainside run for their lives, even ditching their tents? What could drag off a guy like Henry, who's over 6 feet tall, without him making a sound? But soon enough, I was going to find out exactly what it was. The moon was high in the sky, already past 1 in the morning. It wouldn't be long before I had to swap shifts with Sophia. We'd been hiking all day, and the physical toll was brutal. Every time we stopped, my legs would just give out and I'd collapse. I was exhausted and barely staying awake, my head dipping forward every now and then. Half dazed, I thought I heard some rustling coming from the trees on one side. I blinked and lifted my head. There was Caleb's bright purple jacket. His face was as pale as a ghost, covered in small cuts, struggling to push through the branches as he stumbled out of the red pine forest. I felt a rush of relief and waved at him, shouting, "Hey, here, here!" Caleb glanced at me, and his tense expression slowly started to relax. Jack shot up like a rocket and started to walk toward him, but after only a few steps he froze. My face went pale too. Caleb, not understanding what was happening, looked confused and asked, "What's wrong?" A cold shiver crept up my spine, spreading all the way to my head. I stiffly raised my hand and pointed behind him. The moment Caleb stepped out of the red pine forest, a huge black shadow followed him. It wasn't a bear. It wasn't anything I had ever seen before, really hard to describe. It looked like a black squashed sack with sharp limbs, a long, thin neck like a hanging corpse. And the face at the top. It was Olivia's face. Caleb seemed to sense something was wrong, and his face went white as a sheet. He froze, not daring to turn around. But before he could react, almost in an instant, the creature with Olivia's face tore itself open from the middle, revealing rows of vicious teeth running through its entire body. It lunged at him, its head engulfing him in one swift move. A shadow covered Caleb, and the thing swallowed him whole. Soon the creature's black sack-like body began to bulge with a human shape. The horrible sound of teeth crunching and bones grinding filled the air. Jack and I just stood there, frozen in terror, watching Caleb being devoured. "Run!" Jack managed to spit the words through gritted teeth. I was too stunned to react. "Run, damn it!" Jack yelled, grabbing me and dragging me away. But the creature didn't follow us. It just gave us one long, cold stare before retreating back into the dark forest. It was as if it had already had its fill. At this point, I was completely freaked out. My brain went blank, and I looked at Jack, saying in a daze, "What the hell was that thing?" Jack's face was as white as the snow beneath us. "I think it was Olivia." After disappearing that day, Olivia had turned into this thing. The one who scared that group so badly they dropped everything and ran. The one who dragged Henry away without a sound. It was Olivia. For a moment, everything spun around me. I almost couldn't keep my balance. I even felt like shouting to the sky, "Screw it, just kill me already. I've had enough of this shit." "Quit standing there." Jack jerked me forward. "If we don't move, we'll be next when Olivia finishes with Caleb." My brain was in a fog, and I stumbled forward as Jack dragged me along. Sophia woke up from the noise, slashed open the tent with a knife, and although confused, followed us as we ran. She was panting as she asked in panic, "What's going on? Did that thing show up?" I had no idea how to explain. I just pulled her along, running as fast as I could until we could barely move anymore. My legs gave out and I collapsed onto the snow. Sophia, still holding on to me, fell too, and we both ended up in the snow face first. Luckily, the snow was deep, so we didn't get hurt. "You..." She pushed me, out of breath. "Tell me, what the hell did we just run into?" I glanced at her, unsure how to explain. "Olivia," Jack said, supporting himself with his hands, staring blankly ahead. Sophia's face lit up with relief, then froze. "So why the hell are you two running?" "We saw Olivia turn into a monster, and she ate Caleb alive." Sophia wrapped herself tighter in her coat, her face going pale. So, you're saying we're in some kind of parallel universe? There's no Helakla Mountain here, only Hyadan. And in this parallel world, if there's already someone who looks exactly like us, the world's rules will either turn us into monsters or just kill us. I looked down at the snow. The moonlight was strong, and the snow was shining bright as day. That's my guess. I can't think of anything else that makes sense. Sophia sat down beside me, shivering. I could feel her body shaking. So, what happens to us now? Are there versions of us in this world? I don't know. When we saw that group, I was too shocked by Nova to notice what the others looked like. Then, I heard a soft sobbing sound beside me. Sophia had rested her head on my shoulder, choking back tears. "Ava, I regret this so much," she whispered. "Why did we even come here? Everyone warned us it was a death trap, but we still came looking for trouble." She covered her eyes, and the tears in her hands slowly froze into ice. "My parents are waiting for me to come home. They must be freaking out by now." I patted her hand, about to comfort her, but my throat tightened, and tears spilled uncontrollably. The past 22 years I hadn't exactly been spoiled, but I'd certainly been taken care of. I was my parents' only child, treated like precious glass, always protected. When had I ever faced anything this brutal? But then I thought of the friends we had lost, and I felt a strange, guilty sense of relief that I was still alive. In this temperature, there's no way we'd survive out there. Before long, I was frozen to the bone. It felt like ice was creeping out of my marrow and chest. Now the three of us faced an impossible choice. Die out here from the cold, or go back to get the tents, but risk being eaten alive by Olivia. Just thinking of the sound of her chewing Caleb, the crunching of his bones made my hair stand on end. I'd rather freeze to death than go back and get chewed up. "We have to go back," Jack said after a long pause. "If we stay here, we'll freeze to death for sure. But if we go back..." I knew exactly what he meant. If we went back, maybe we could use the bodies of our friends to survive, just like Henry had been dragged off. But none of us wanted to be the one left behind. "It's fine," Jack said, lowering his gaze. "She's probably still busy digesting Caleb. She won't be coming out anytime soon. Let's grab our stuff and get out of here." To be honest, Caleb and Olivia's history was a mess. Technically, Caleb was the one who screwed up first, cheating and not even trying to help Olivia, so he was in the wrong. But now, he was dead, eaten alive by Olivia, and we still couldn't help but feel sorry for him. We'd been agonizing over this for a while, but slowly the cold started to numb me, and oddly enough I felt a slight warmth. That's when I got suspicious. In a place like this, where the cold can freeze you solid, warmth can be the deadliest thing. Fake warmth pulls you in, and before you know it, you're dead. My eyelids felt heavy, and I knew if I kept this up I'd freeze to death for sure. So I made up my mind, better to take a chance and go back for supplies than just sit here and die slowly. I gritted my teeth and stood up. "I'm going back to get the stuff. You guys coming with me?" Jack, who had almost dozed off, snapped awake at the sound of my voice. "I'm coming, hell, it's freezing." Sophia didn't seem too keen, but seeing us both getting ready to go, she didn't want to be left behind. She cautiously followed behind me. Honestly, at this point, I had already made peace with dying, but I'd rather go down fighting than freeze to death here. We trudged up the mountain step by step. The cold had completely numbed my feet, and my body felt like it was moving on autopilot. At night, the mountains surrounding us were no longer beautiful. The usual majestic scenery had turned into jagged black silhouettes. After what felt like forever, we finally spotted the dark red pine forest in the distance. None of us knew if Olivia was waiting for us in the darkness. Jack swallowed loudly, and I could hear his heartbeat pounding in my ears. "You two are like sisters. Why don't you go ahead first? Catch up with her while I grab the stuff." He tried to lighten the mood with a joke, but none of us felt like laughing. "Fine," Jack said, raising both hands. "If I don't make it back, don't forget to look after my parents." With that, he turned and marched into the night without a second glance. He just walked straight into the darkness. I could barely hold it together. Truth be told, we hadn't even known each other before this trip, just a random team up for a few days. But Jack had been looking out for us every step of the way. I blinked away the tears welling up in my eyes, and before my brain could even process it, my legs were already moving. I couldn't let Jack die in front of me, not when I'd survived through so much. If we were going to die today, we'd die together. I didn't believe we couldn't take Olivia down if we fought her. Sophia followed behind me, grabbing my hand, and we both continued, trudging through the snow like we were on a death march. We were in a race against time. The seconds and minutes felt like they were slipping away. Every second counted. Our survival depended on it. We managed to grab the gear and make a run for it, hauling ass down the mountain for what felt like half an hour. Thank God the mountain wasn't too high, or we'd have been dead just running downhill in this freezing cold. We bundled ourselves up in all our clothes, not stopping for a second. The cold was so intense it felt like it was freezing our bones, but somehow we were still sweating from the sheer effort. We couldn't afford to stop. If we did, we wouldn't last 20 minutes before freezing stiff. We'd been running for what felt like hours, until I couldn't take another step. I can't, I'm dying, I panted. I'm going to freeze to death if I keep going. Sophia stumbled into the snow beside me, unable to catch her breath. Jack didn't say anything. He just stood there. I looked up at him. Your stamina's insane. You should rest for a minute. Jack didn't reply. The huge white moon cast long shadows over him, and I couldn't see his face, just a silhouette. But something felt off. My gut twisted with a dangerous feeling I couldn't shake. The moonlight was so bright I could see every detail, and that's when I noticed it. Jack was growing taller. His body seemed to flatten and stretch, like something inside him was being hollowed out. His torso bulged like a black sack, sharp teeth lining the sides. Slowly, he looked up. His face had drained of colour, and the light reflected off the snow made it look sickly pale. I stood frozen in place. Maybe it was all the shocks from the day, but oddly, I wasn't as scared as I should have been. I just had one thought running through my mind. Here we go. Despite my numbness, the will to survive kicked in. I grabbed Sophia, who was too shocked to move, and we ran like hell, heading down the mountain. As we ran, I couldn't help but mock myself. Of all the things I've done these past few days, I haven't done anything useful, except run. Too bad my phone didn't have a signal, otherwise I'd definitely be top of the leaderboard for steps. Jack, now fully transformed, glided toward us with ease. His claws dug into the snow, and with a single swipe he was flung forward, covering meters in an instant. That's when I realised the strange marks we saw on the snow earlier weren't from Olivia. They were Jack's. We were running on fumes, but we kept pushing, our legs slowly sinking into the snow like we were wading through mud. It was getting harder to move. Jack was getting closer and closer. I could feel the wind from his movements before he even reached us. Then, as luck would have it, Sophia tripped, crashing into the snow with a thud. Jack swiped at her. Her jacket split open, revealing the bloodstains underneath. He took a slow, deliberate step toward her, his body opening like a monstrous sack of flesh, full of sharp teeth. We were about to die here, unless I did something. I looked up at the mountain, biting my lip, and screamed at the top of my lungs. Ah! Jack paused, startled by my scream. But it didn't stop him. He resumed his slow, deliberate advance, his shadow engulfing us. Just as he was about to strike, a deafening roar echoed through the mountains like thunder tearing through the sky. Snow was rushing down the mountain in a massive avalanche. It was the end of us, unless we all went down together. I spread my arms wide, screaming, "Fuck!" at the top of my lungs, not caring about anything else. The avalanche slammed into us with the force of 1,000 storms, and Jack, trying to escape, only got a few steps before the snow swallowed him whole. Everything went dark. When I woke up, the first thing I noticed was the bright white ceiling. It smelled like antiseptic, and my body felt like it had been run over by a truck. A nurse came over, noticing my movement. She checked the monitors and smiled. "You're awake. You've been out for 3 days." I tried to speak, but my throat felt like I'd swallowed glass, the pain sharp and unbearable. "Sophia." "Where's Sophia?" I croaked. The nurse didn't catch it, so she quickly changed my IV and went off to find the doctor. I was alive. But what about Jack and Sophia? What happened to them? The TV in my room suddenly blared to life, and I caught something that made my blood run cold. Search efforts have made progress in locating the missing climbing team from Hyodan University. 1 survivor was found at the base of the mountain, while 6 others are still missing. I froze. What? Hyodan? We had been climbing Helakla Mountain, hadn't we? I turned to look at the reflection in the window. My face was pale, twisted in a grotesque way I couldn't even recognize.